and we'll just
right now.
right now. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. I don't know what's wrong with my Zoom settings, but it will be okay. So yes, one of our own, and just so excited about this event. So Marcella and Bartwin are here. So we'll have a presentation. I believe there's some polling that we'll do, and then we'll have Q&A after, right? Or throughout. So we'll just see how it goes. But
Yeah.
welcome, Marcella and Bartwin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beth. So welcome, everyone. I am Beth. Can you give me access to sharing my screen?
Yes. Yes, she says, knowingly, this is the stuff we should have been doing before the meeting.
We had so many discussions. It was so cool.
Yeah, I will do this. Do you have any filler? Can you tell a joke? Because I gotta find it.
Yeah, well, not a joke. That's Bartwin's cue most of the time. Bartwin, do you have a dad joke?
Always.
Always. There you go. Give it.
All right. So guy goes to the doctor and he gets some bad news, and doctor says, listen, you don't have very long to live, so I'm so unfortunate to tell you this message. And the guy goes like, all right, so I want a second opinion. And the doctor goes, all right, you're ugly too.
Oh, nice.
Quick, find the slides.
Yeah. All right. Marcella has the ball.
I see what the shit part of this is. Gotcha.
That was a good one. Yay. So this is what Bartwin always does. He shares his dad jokes. So I'm really pleased working with him. It's always good. So hey guys, thanks for joining us. I will speak on behalf of myself because I have no clue how Bartwin is feeling, but I'm kind of nervous. And normally I don't have this, like I'm really comfortable in speaking in front of huge crowds or through Zoom. But what we are going to present to you guys is something that Bartwin and I have been working on for a few months. So it's a bit of our thingy, our baby, and it feels a bit anxious to actually share it with you guys, but we're really excited as well. So what we are going to do, I will share in the chat right now a link. That was funny. I will share you a link in the chat, which opens a Google Sheet. And if you have any comments, remarks, feedback, anything you'd like to share, you can leave that in the sheet because after the presentation, after the meetup, Bartwin and I can then get back to you on either give a response to your question, or we can just use your feedback to make our presentation and our thing that we're going to show you guys better. So thanks for that. I think, do I forget something? I don't think so. So I hope you're not afraid of the title. Bartwin and I used own it or own shit. We are both Dutch and we swear kind of sometimes. I tend to swear a bit more than Bartwin actually, but for us, this is not so bad, but we tested it with a few Kiwis. And apparently this is kind of heavy. So I hope you're still alive and still breathing. This is the only swearing word we'll use during the presentation. So that's it. All right, guys, let's start. If you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the sheet or put it in the chat. And I've got my colleague Fraser on the chat looking out for all your questions. So he will make sure he will address it when needed. Let's start off by telling you a bit about ourselves. Like I said, I'm from the Netherlands, from Utrecht. I came to New Zealand over a year ago. I work for Surety Consulting as an Agile coach. I started in somewhere 7-8 years ago as a website developer, and gradually went from that towards a Agile coach, which I'm now. I'm a transformation lead. I led a few transformations, quite a few transformations back home in the Netherlands. One of the major ones that you probably know, I worked during a small period of time at ING, then KPN, worked at Rabobank, ABN AMRO, big banks, big insurance companies as well. What I do quite differently than a lot of coaches around the globe is that I focus a lot around psychology and neuroscience. I'm studying it at the moment through all sorts of courses. I read a lot of stuff as well, and I use that in my engagements. So if you have any questions around that, I will probably be the one who goes directly to, did you know how your brain works, kind of thing. So that's my guilty pleasure thing. So Barwin, it's up to you then.
Yes, thanks. So here's my little introduction. I guess the first question I usually get, is that a real name? And yes, it is a real name. It's not made up. It's not a bad joke, although I do, as you know by now, excel at bad jokes. I also respond well to any other abbreviation or diversion of the name, so Martin or anything else, just fine with that. From the Netherlands, business consultant and agile coach for Surety at the moment. And background, very diverse background. I've been an entrepreneur, a research consultant, and now a business consultant, agile coach, obviously. Management coaching, team development, and leadership are the main topics that I'm working in. And maybe fun fact to know, anything to do with TV series, music, or storytelling, I'm interested in and know quite a bit about. So if you're craving for that next Netflix binge session, then hit me up with a message.
Okay, cool. So let's start off with the poll before we dive into our presentation. Beth, you can do it. Yes, awesome. So you have 4 statements, and if you can all give your answer to these statements. It should be visible for you guys. Yes, there we go. If you're dialing in from a phone, this will be quite hard to access, but if you are able to do it, please fill it in. There's no right or wrong, so no worries. We're not going to test you on anything. Okay, I'm going to write it down for myself. Okay, I think we've got it. Awesome. All right. I will end the poll. Thank you, guys. Awesome. Really good. Thanks. We'll get back to this later on. Yep. I will close the poll. All right. Let's start off by what we're going to present to you today. Barwin.
Yes. Is the poll closed though? Because it's still on my screen. I don't know if anybody else has the same thing. That would be a shame because it seems to be blocking the presentation.
I did close the poll, so
Yeah.
All right.
But
Cool.
did you click
Good
submit
for
for
me.
that one?
Yeah. All right. Cool. There we are. So the topic that we wanted to talk to you about today is obviously about ownership. And we got around talking to that topic when we were discussing, obviously from a professional point of view, transformations and organizational change. So, of course, it would be good to first do a bit of research around transformation. So to have some data to go with the idea of what's happening with the organizational transformation in the world today. So as you well know, I think there is a multitude of information available on the internet when you click on topic like ownership or topic like organizational change, or I think everybody has like 5 steps, 3 frameworks and 4 stances to take on for successful change. So, but we did feel that it would be interesting to look at the success rate of some of these changes. So if you look at the, so we just picked one of the results that we found in our research. And so we find that 93% of US companies are currently in organizational change or a phase of organizational change. And when I was thinking about this fact, I think actually with COVID and with the lockdown, I think 100% of companies are currently facing some kind of change, right? So we all need to rethink how we are going to serve our customers. Even us agile coaches do have to think about setting up a virtual training over face-to-face training and so on. So there's a very large number of companies currently experiencing organizational change. And if you look at the second bit of information that we found in that research, is that yearly there is a staggering $10 billion being spent on change management. So that means consultants, coaches, any kind of professionals that are currently busy making a transformation happen at organizational level. So you would think with so many companies working on changing their company or the way that they organize themselves and the amount of money, amount of budget being spent on making that success happen, that there would be a result from that input. But if you look at that result, then you see that we've also found in our research that 74% of these organizational change efforts fail. And that's when you look at the numbers of the amount of companies and the amount of budget being spent, then that's a big number. So we were thinking, if 74% of these organizational changes fail, how so? What's the core element of these things failing? If we have so much data available, so much books available, research papers available, so much input available to a successful change, how come this number is so high? And so we brought it back to thinking about what organizations ask from us. Maybe that could give a good insight. So, and we're painting the picture quite black and white here, so bear with us for a minute. But roughly speaking, organizations come to us and they say, please help us explain some of the fundamentals of Agile so that we all speak the same language in the office. And when we've set the basic fundament of Agile, how about giving us an action plan on how to implement it in our environment? So how would this Agile thing work for us? And obviously, when you have made this action plan with us, coach and consult us during this implementation phase, and when you've done such a thing, maybe first a pilot and then go for another set of teams, then maybe we talk about a bit of management, scaling up, and then we feel that the transformation would in essence be complete. However, I don't know obviously what your experiences are when talking to companies. If this is the way that we are being engaged to help in organizational change, something isn't right, something isn't clicking. If 74% of the organizational change efforts still fail, then these things need something added, something extra to it. Because there's nothing wrong with setting the right fundamentals of Agile. There's nothing wrong with an action plan on how to implement it in your environment. In fact, it would be advisable to do so. And there's certainly nothing wrong with helping and in coaching and consulting a company during that implementation phase. So what is what is that ingredient that seems to be missing in order to take ownership of that change?
So what we did, Bartwin and I were having the same conversation with the two of us, why it is that so many organizations start a change initiative, but in the end, 74% of all those change initiatives tend to fail. And why is that? So we deep dived into that. We took all our experience that we had. We had interviews and conversations with people from different organizations in transformations or team changes or process changes, like every single thing. And we found a few aspects that were basically key in order to make a success out of your change initiative. One of those elements that will get you towards your success is having a driver. So what a driver is your why, actually. Why are you doing this? And what we do with a driver is we find out where our motivation is to change, and we set a plan. So your driver is basically your road, your journey towards the end destination or your goal or whatever. So we set that up. We set a goal, either it's per sprint, per quarter, per project, per whatever suits your business environment. We adapt some kind of ways of working that uses iterations, whether it's Scrum or you use any other type of working. But we all realize that if you have a drive and you have your plan ready, you need to understand if you're doing the right thing. So we use the ways of working so that we can get that feedback in order to understand if we're doing the right thing. And of course, what is really key in your drive, and what a lot of teams and organizations forget, is to actually celebrate your successes. Because nothing is more demotivating to actually need to follow your plan, your driver towards your end goal, and every single success is basically, it is work. And therefore, we don't have to celebrate. It can become a real drag to actually keep focus on what you try to achieve. So that's one element. The other element that we found out was action. People need to get into action. That is really blunt to say, but it is what it is. There is something difficult to understand around why people get into action or not. What we saw in a lot of research that has been done is that if you take a look at your motivation, what we discovered in your drive, what is the motivation, what is your why to actually do it? As soon as your motivation comes from an external factor, you tend to be less committed to get into action. But if your motivation is influenced by internal factors, so just it's making you better, or it's making you feel better, or it gets you somewhere, we tend to be way more committed to actually do it. Also, one of the key elements to get people into action, what we saw with a lot of engagements, is the language that is used. And I'm not talking about whether you call it Scrum, Kanban, a sprint, or an iteration, but the whole active use of language. If we tell yourself, for example, I need to do this, your brain automatically puts a hold onto your action. Because need to refers back to there is an external factor that wants something from me, and I need to make sure if it is actually the right thing for me to do it. If we use the language, I want to, that's reconnecting our brain towards our internal motivation factors, and therefore we tend to get into action better, quicker at least. There are two other things into action which are sometimes forgotten when we talk about change, and this comes specifically, you see this happening during leadership coaching that we do both, and that is getting your skin in the game. What we see is that a lot of leadership teams, since we're talking about leadership, or I will take that example, a lot of leadership teams tend to say, okay, this is why we need to change, this is how we're going to do it, and then just everyone needs to do it, so the teams need to work in a different cadence or in a different way, and then as soon as everyone does that, we'll be okay, and if it fails, then it is all the teams that are going through a restructure or whatever it is, but it is something that is going to end up in a bad way most of the time. We see that a lot of leadership teams, and therefore leadership management as well, tend to have less skin in the game. So if something fails, whether it's the whole transformation of just a change in processes, they are not getting into action as soon as they don't get affected by the outcomes. As soon as that changes, so as soon as people get skin in the game and they are connected to the outcome, people tend to use their action into stepping forward. The other thing is the size. The team size does matter. This is basic research and you probably all know it. The smaller the teams, the better it works to get into action. So there is a balance. Like if you know more about the theory behind scrum.org, they say a scrum team is 3 to 9 people. Research has shown that 5 people in a team is the perfect balance. That is said that 5 people in a team are perfectly balanced to get people into action. The bigger your team gets, the harder it gets. If it goes over 9 people, it shows that you're creating automatically sub-teams. For this, it's pretty easy to follow, I hope. But there is a thing. There is a thing. Because the driver that we talked about in the action, that is where a lot of consultancy organizations or coaches, whether you call it your agile coach or just a change coach, they tend to focus a lot on a driver and an action. What Bartwin was mentioning, this is most of the time also the question that we get from organizations to help them. Help them to make a roadmap, help me to create a backlog, help me to get my team into action, help me to get my team more self-organizing and make it happen. It's a lot focus on the driver and the action. But focusing on just this equals a 74% failure. And that's where our thing started, our brain started to work. And this was something that we said, we're missing something out there and we're missing something that is not talked about during transformations.
Yeah, so if we take those 2 items, driver and action, I found this quote to be increasingly true. So the challenge here would be that some people that I've encountered during my coaching and consultancy hours have said to me, people don't want to change. They are change resistance and they don't want to be part of any change at all. But I feel like this is the message that we're trying to bring out is people do want to change, but there's a condition. So they need to understand why it is necessary to change. And then if they understand the why behind the change, they would be more inclined to change. And the thing that we wanted to enhance in our book, in our thinking about this topic, is that we want to take it one step further. Because what we found out is that most people are, well, I've read it in a book called Tired of Change, a change fatigue, if you will. So it's not that they don't want to change and they understand cognitively why it is necessary to change, but they don't believe, they don't feel that the change is going to affect anything. And because they have seen many other changes being announced and being tried and being pushed through without any effect. So they've sort of lost the belief in that change to be effective. So as a personal example, I was working at a big corporate bank in which the data was showing that that bank was losing a lot of money every quarter or every month even to their competitors. So as part of my presence there, I asked them, well, if we take this data serious, if we look at this data seriously, then you can see that we are losing some money, so, or rather a lot of money. So that will be a big why to start changing, to start doing something else, responding to what's needed to be changed instead of following the plan. And they declined that. They said, like, doesn't really matter. This is all going to blow over anyways, and it's going to have an uptick somewhere else. And what I've actually engaged with them was the lack of belief. They didn't really believe what I was saying. They could understand it. They could see how it worked together and why, cognitively speaking, it was a good thing to change and try something different, but they didn't believe it. So in order to change, we need to believe that we can actually do it. We can actually need to make that statement of belief that we can get behind whatever the change is asking from us. And we found out that that third part adds very much to the driver and to the action bit, and is lacking now for proper success of the change. So if you're talking about ownership, which in essence is leadership, you can see leadership obviously being the job title, or leader being the front person of a company. We, in this book, would like to see leadership as being ownership. So you start taking the lead, you start to take ownership of a change. If you have that driver set in place, if you have actions connected to that, but then very much also the belief that the change you're about to execute or start off with is actually going to change something. So leadership equals ownership. So if you can see from this basic Venn diagram where those three elements come together, that's where ownership is executed. And this is the basic premise of our model.
Yeah, I think what we discovered, we also try to incorporate this in our own personal lives to see how we are doing actually on the belief part. And it is key to actually have the right balance with all these three elements. So it's not either or, it's everything needs to be in place to actually get something done and change something to get the ownership.
Yeah. So just as an example, let's say you have lots of belief, but don't have any plan to back it up, or don't do anything, actually, you do not take any action, then that belief in its essence is dead.
Yeah.
And vice versa, if you have lots of planning going on, and you build lots of Kanban boards and you do lots of planning and stuff, but you never take action on it, and in essence you really don't believe that the change that's being proposed is going to work, and that ownership is going to be very minimal.
Yeah.
So here are some statements of unbelief. We put the "un" between brackets because we're going to explain that in a bit. This is what it might sound like when you encounter your clients or your prospect clients or what have you. These are some statements that you can envision hearing when you're trying to discuss with them the change that's being at hand. So I will believe it when I see it, obviously being the best statement here for I actually don't believe what you're saying. So that's also a strong belief, but then a strong belief in a bad outcome, in a negative outcome. Or just, if this fails, we'll try something new. Don't call us, we call you. Let's talk again after you got this Teams working, and don't bother me till then, because if you got this Teams working, then I'm gonna have the first idea of a belief that maybe this Agile thing is actually something that we can get behind. And so curious to hear from you guys if you have any statements of unbelief or believe that you want to add. Feel free to add them in the Google Sheet, obviously. So these are it was kind of an eye-opener to think about this stuff from a perspective of belief, because every time when we get invited to a company or to a team or a consultant or a leader, or a leader then to their teams, actually, I would say, they are trying to convince them, trying to make them believe that the change that they are proposing is the right way to go. So they either have data sheets, or they say maybe they're strong on their personal belief and then go, I've been to a convention or seminar and somebody talked about this Agile thing and I really believed it. So I'm totally convinced that we should just tomorrow you become a product owner, you'll be a scrum master. So let's go and do this stuff. And by do this stuff, I mean you have to execute it, and I'll just back up with lots of fluffy words or anything in between. So it's interesting to ponder that over. And what we have found is that this element of belief is actually the defining element in the three parts together. So we called it the volume of ownership, because driver, belief, action is abbreviated into DBA. And having belief as that defining ingredient to ownership means that you have to match your driver and your action to the amount of belief that you have. So what that means is, if you have a low level of belief in the change you're trying to execute, overreaching with a big plan and lots of actions will end up in the 74% losing or failing your organizational change. So the interesting part here being to have a talking point with your clients. What is their belief in the organizational change they're about to embark on? And
or managers
or managers, yep. And then to have that match to their driver and to their action. Because if you don't have a lot of belief, then you definitely will end up in the 74% failure rate. So tuning your ownership to the level of belief in your organizational change is a key, we feel, to success.
All right.
So just to give it a image to go with that, you'll see on the right the model we just presented, belief, driver, and action. And on the left, you will see a much smaller amount of belief. And then obviously, visually, you see the ownership being very small represented. But that's the interesting part. So we very much believe in the statement that it's all about you. I've been in too many discussions, and I was in one last week in which it was blatantly said that it's just management. You know, the leadership need to do something, and if the leadership's not going to change, it's not going to work. Well, I believe, obviously, being that belief is super important, and that management is important for you to back you up. Obviously, I do believe that it all starts with you. So if you yourself are doubtful about the change, or you yourself are very doubtful about the journey you're going to embark on, then the action and driver should follow that amount of belief instead of overreaching in your plan or in your driver and in your action.
But we're not there yet. Because it sounds pretty easy, just believe in it, right? That's basically what we're saying. But we also understand that it's not so easy. And I think that's why the percentage of change initiatives that are a success are so low, because it is not so easy. And that has to do with a few things that your brain does. Your brain is a really fascinating thing. It does so much to protect ourselves that is sometimes not really helping us. So, for example, the thing that your brain automatically does is it creates a better version in your memories of yourself. So if you, for example, do a retrospective around your previous projects, keep an eye or keep a thought around what you are thinking, because your brain automatically makes the image, the memory that you have of how the project was run, make you a better person, a better thing in that memory. So that's a really weird thing. Also, when we look at how we act and look back on how stuff went, whether it's a personal change or it is an organizational change, we have something that we do as well. And that is that we tend to judge ourselves based on our intentions. And to be honest, everyone does something with the right intentions. So that's why we come off better. But we judge others by their behavior. And that's where it gets really tricky. And because the brain does that automatically, it creates also a dysfunctional image on how it actually was. There is something more going on, because if that was only the case, we can deal with it. We can cope with that. Just ask a lot of feedback, and finally you will get to a point where you start realizing maybe you weren't that perfect. There is also a bit of an ignore mode. So your brain is completely focused on protecting yourself. We all know the 5 F's, like the fight, flight, freeze, and we added another one, the 4 F's, the 5's. So that is what your brain basically does in every situation where you find yourself in. It does a quick scan and it decides, am I going to fight this, flight, freeze, or just give 5's and say, yes, let's do it. The thing is that it makes us a bit more capable of ignoring stuff around us, because what we do has to do with the confirmation bias. As soon as we believe something in our subconscious, and that is the hard part, is most of the time happening in your subconscious, your belief creation. When we believe something, we look for evidence that supports our belief. It doesn't go the other way around. I know some of you will now think like, that's wrong. I do read a lot of articles, and based on the facts that I'm reading, I create my belief. But it doesn't. Your subconscious creates your belief even before you know it consciously. And that's where the whole confirmation bias kicks in. So you look for the proof that supports your belief. In other words, we've all probably been there, that a project ran into chaos or complete failure. And when we look back, we basically said, yeah, well, the numbers show that it wasn't really going well. But yeah, then again, we invested a lot of time and money already. So we better could like completely follow it and just end it than that we actually would have stuck in between. That is because we just keep ignoring the facts around us, that sometimes things don't go well or do go well, but we have a belief that it doesn't or it does. There is another thing that's going on, which your brain does as well, is the whole defense mode, which you kind of see as a defense mechanism that your brain creates. This is the fight mode. And you see that a lot during transformations. When people don't believe they get something out of it, they don't believe it's going to work, and they get defensive. They start looking for facts that are adding to their belief that things didn't happen or couldn't happen. And the same goes for the blame management part. Most of the time it's always management, right? So this fails because, yeah, well, management wasn't into it. Management didn't have the skin in the game. Management wasn't the lead of this transformation. When we started off this presentation, I gave you a few statements. And the fun fact is that you actually saw it happening in the statements. And I know we made it a bit black and white. I know I'm not going to tell you that you're right or wrong. It is funny to see how your brain instantly does something. So first statement was, I am the right person to actually change something. This is the I'm awesome part that your brain does. So what it does when you saw the statement, it continuously goes back to your experiences and it shows a better version of you, and therefore it is corrected. 87% says, yes, I am, which is quite funny because that means we were all capable of changing anything around us. Still we aren't. The other one was the organizational change needs to come from leadership. This is the blame management part kind of thing that kicks in because 75% said it should. The organizational transformation doesn't succeed, it has to do with people in the wrong places. We got like a balance into that. Like 53% says, yes, that is correct. It's because people are not in the right place. That is a bit of the defense mode and I'm awesome statement. And the last one was feedback should be uplifting, where you guys said 60% of you guys said, yes, it should be uplifting. And that is, and I know this sounds really blunt and I don't mean it, but I'm trying to create a picture where you can see what's happening in your brain. This is the ignore mode. We don't like to concentrate on what's not working, so we ignore most of the time the fact that stuff isn't working. And therefore we ignore actually really good signals that we need to either change course or we need to support other people or we need to change our own beliefs. And this is all happening automatically. That is what it's so hard about.
Yeah, I want to chime in on the feedback bit. We were, I think, last week presenting or teaching a course in which the theme of being brutally honest was introduced. And that sounded, it's of course written, is of course based on the book. But the thing we noticed in the group is that at first people were kind of shocked by the idea of being brutally honest. And at the same time, when they started thinking about that theme, start discussing what does that actually mean. Radical Candor indeed would be that book. And what does that mean for us to be brutally honest? It's so, the group started setting up sort of a basic rule set. Like, it's not designed, being brutally honest doesn't mean you need to drag somebody down or be very negative onto somebody. But it does need to be that clear that somebody can be made aware of destructive behavior or dysfunctional behavior. So the interesting part was that by addressing the topic of being brutally honest and what it meant to the group, you started to see a change and started to recognize that brain process was actually impeding their progress. So it was an interesting life example.
Do you want to do the case study? Do we have time?
Do we have time?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. All right, good. So just as an idea, we decided to play close to home. We picked a purpose and a set of values from a certain company. And we just wanted to show you that, like any other company, that company is also looking into changing to the new ways of working. So what would that mean? Not only on the structure of the company, but also to our purpose, to our vision, to our values. So what does that entail for us? So as part of that, we also looked at the belief statements. So as sort of an exercise. So what you saw was the purpose of the company, and these are the values of that company being set into place. And I think you'll find in other companies that they also have like a mission statement, some values obviously set into place, and to make sure that you adhere to the culture of the company. And then we started to challenge them on thinking about how about we just try and make those simple belief statements. So what do we actually believe as a company to be true? And we came to these belief statements. So we believe that people should be at the core. We believe in the power of partnership. We believe in creating value in all that we do. And we believe that technology is there to serve people. And these belief statements then were then not broken down into values, but then being addressed into what does that mean for us? So if we look at the how of the company, how will we apply this stuff? So if we feel that, if we actually believe in the power of partnership, should we help companies in these COVID and lockdown times without billing them for a certain amount of time, just to make sure that they stay alive, that they stay within their life cycle? if technology is there to serve people, what would that mean for the technology services that we offer to them? And if people should be at the core, how would that show in the proposals that we write to our clients? So just by setting these belief statements, we had an interesting discussion on what do you actually believe as a professional within your company, and then also what would that mean in the practicality of our everyday work. If people should be at the core, then it should be easier for that company to maybe set apart a bit of salary for people who don't have it that well within the company. Or what are the things we're trying to achieve as a company to make sure that there aren't any layoffs during this COVID period. All those talking topics were at the table, and I think that was a nice example of how these belief statements then could influence your organizational change.
We did this, by the way, not just with the leadership team, but with a larger group of people. So also other people who are just more the doing work. And what we saw, what was interesting from my point of view, is that the amount of commitment, the amount of action that came in just creating these very easy statements was way more than we've ever had in any workshop whatsoever, because we all know the values. It's kind of like a far from our home kind of situation. It just feels, oh yeah, we have the values, so we can name them. Okay, all good. We know the purpose. Yeah, it's some blurb somewhere in Confluence page, and we know it when we get an hour to look for it. And suddenly these belief statements were kind of like, oh yeah, key. Yeah, it's all about people. So what do we do now? And the actions that resulted out of that were also coming from other people than just management. So it was really cool to see that it actually worked in instance to get the conversation started.
Yes, I think if the final takeaway for me there was the interesting bit of feedback that I heard from the participants, or that they gave us, that by actually making a belief statement, there was there was powerful language, powerful communication by saying, I believe, or we believe X, or we believe this statement, that there was more power in that communication than in the purpose statement. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Okay.
So how about your personal statement of belief? I realized we went through these concepts quite quickly. For us, we've been working on them for quite a bit, so they're more familiar to us, but I'm curious to, of course, get some feedback, as would be nice to see. And I think also, I hope that it challenges you to think about your own personal statement of belief. So when you look at a current case for you in organizational change, whether it is within your company or if you are working for that company as a coach or consultant, what's the belief statement that they would have in that organizational change? But maybe more important, because we do really want to stress that it's all about you. What's your belief statement? If you look into your heart of hearts, what do you believe that organizational change to be successful or not? And secondly, we talked a bit about these brain games, the attribution error there. So that one of the comments was indeed. So what kind of brain games do you notice for yourself? What are the pitfalls that you do feel that your brain is sort of leading you into? And that would be the question that we would like to ask you guys. Very curious about your answers. Please share those, of course, in the Google Docs and I'm sure in the Q&A. Yeah, sure.
If you want to come off mute, that's all good. I'm curious if someone has anything, but yeah, I think what we definitely try to do, and it's also in the book that we're writing about this, is that a lot of the times we hear the conversation around, yeah, management needs to be involved. We need to align management better. We need to align leadership better. Whereas we rethink that, and what we came to the conclusion, it's all about you. Leadership is ownership, and therefore it's you. it's not your leadership team, it's not your executive team. It starts with you. And I think that is key. We need to stop talking about leadership as in management. You are a leader maybe not with the mandate to make organizational decisions. You are a leader to somebody else in your team, to your kids, to your partner, to your neighbor, to whatever. And I think that is key, that we try to simplify in here. It's with you. Don't look at other frameworks, other ways of working to implement, but start working on how do you believe this is going to work.
I'm Marcella.
Hey.
Hi. When you asked that question at the start, you said about does change sit with leadership. I did think I was talking about me, and I did say leadership.
Nice.
But that's how I answered it, with that view in mind. Because,
good.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. Yeah, that's a good start, actually. Very good. So anybody else, what's your belief statement when it comes to organizational change? No, everyone is afraid.
It's a journey. You can't just have to bite off little bits at a time and kind of start to, I call it brainwashing people.
Yep,
little bit by little bit. I'm like the parrot, the broken record, whatever. But I say things, I feel like I have to say things over and over and over again with a lot of patience and a lot of different ways before some concepts start gelling, and they might not take them on board straight away, but at least they start to understand them. And then after a while, they might even decide, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and do it.
Nice, thanks.
Francie here. One of the big things, and I'm not sure if it's a belief statement or if I need to reword it, is I always really believe in showing people the runs on the board. You know, we might be talking about change in terms of agile change, but people might already have the mindset. So if we can point out anything that shows they're already on the journey, you know, you build that confidence, you build that belief of, oh, I'm already doing it. Okay, I can do a little bit more. So that's really important for me, is that show people what they're already doing. There's always something there. You've just got to seek to understand what it is. That's my perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I think on the driver slide, we included this: celebrate your success. And at the group we were teaching or talking to them, we had that same slide in there due to team culture and so on. And so we sort of talked about it and asked them, when was the last time you celebrated any success that you had? And it sort of became silent in the room. And then they all laughed for a bit, and then they said, well, we do lots of good things, and we finish lots of good work, but that's just part of our job, right? So no need to celebrate or think positive about that. But I do believe, in the same vein as you, Francie, that if you celebrate those successes, it sort of builds belief that you are on the right track, and that that the change has an effect. So that's actually a great point.
Right, we'll close off and then we do the Q&A.
Yes.
So this is what we wanted to present to you guys. So to sum it all up, we basically looked at a bunch of transformations, a bunch of engagements that we both ran through. And what we came to the conclusion was that leadership is taking ownership. So ownership is the key part of it. And that ownership comes in a balance of knowing your driver, getting into action, but definitely having the belief that you either can or cannot do it. It can be a negative thing as well. And be aware of, as soon as you start believing into something, that a lot of your processes that are happening on a neuroscience level are diving in like an automatic approach, like an automatic process. And to keep an eye on that is really important. In order to focus more, we believe we need to focus more during our change initiatives around how do people believe in it or not. And to use the belief statements is indeed like a good first impression to actually start having that conversation. It takes a lot of time, a lot of coaching. There is no framework that is going to get you believe in stuff on Monday morning. I wish there was, and I think a lot of people with me wish there were.
I don't.
Good. So that is our key, and it all starts with you. It doesn't start with your leadership team. It doesn't start with another team or another department. It all starts with you, and that is our takeaway. So any questions or feedback, comments?
Well, I did see the Google slide, the Google Doc being used. So
Awesome.
we might have a gander into that. And before we do that, of course, we are writing a book, and we are busy with that book we had the first internal review of the book. So that was good to get some feedback. And obviously we're looking for lots of feedback from you guys as well. Just anything you would like to share about the concept or think of. And let's have a look at the questions in the Google Doc. Anybody want to shout out their question? They're free to do so.
I just wanted to thank Botwin and Marcella. I personally believe what was shared today, it really values a lot, and I think it brings all the bullet points on the table about leadership, about organizational change, and it just starts from within. If we don't believe ourselves, we will not go ahead, and if there are no drivers, there won't be any action, and there won't be any change. So I think you have just joined all the dots. So, and it was very well presented. Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Cool.
I see some book references in here for the book Extreme Ownership. Obviously, that's a great book.
Awesome. Yeah.
Jock Willink, I think his name is. Total badass of a man. You shouldn't mess with him. Great book. Let's see here for a bit more.
Are there maybe any other questions for people who want to come off mute?
Sure.
Sorry, it's Francie again. I have a question.
Yeah,
I always have questions. I'm curious.
Right.
I'm curious for both of yourselves, when you turn up to help teams and organizations go through this change, what, because we always make assumptions around protecting ourselves and our ego. What questions might you ask yourself to challenge your own assumptions when you feel those biases are kicking in?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Yeah. I wish I had a really solid answer. I think that will help a lot of people. I have been through quite a lot the past few years, and I've spent a lot of time on self-awareness and getting more, getting my knowledge around how the brain works, how certain aspects of psychology as well. Therefore, I now know my triggers. So the whole like fight, flight, and freeze kind of reaction, you can link that back to what your triggers are in order to get that defense mechanism up and running. And for me, that was like really key. So I now know better when I feel the trigger coming up for a response that is not helping the situation. So what I normally do is I write down a bunch of open-ended questions before I start the meeting. And I just listen a lot and wait for myself like for 5 seconds until I ask another question, so that I can link my conscious and subconscious level. And I think it is hard work, and that's why this is not done in a day, in a year. This takes time and effort.
I think the funny part here is that anything that you think of is your brain telling you. So there's obviously many biases in place that your brain is telling you, or based on prior experiences or anything there. So it's sort of catch-22 situation, but there's a silver lining there before we all think it's never possible. I think with lots of feedback, being brutally honest, having some data into place, having a meaningful conversation or discussion or dialogue, I should say, with your clients, with your teams, on how it's progressing, the changes, that really helps. And just to be open for other insights, and as Marcella said, being aware of having some knowledge of these brain games really helps. But in the end, it's still your brain telling you stuff, and then you need to challenge that by having input from other people. So the interesting part is, so hopefully that answers your questions there, Francie. But
yeah, no, and it links to my belief so much around mindfulness and how that comes in. I was curious into a technique, which you both have totally answered, around those triggers and being open to that feedback, because hearing it and actually digesting it are two very different things.
Definitely true. Definitely, yeah.
The interesting part is that you hear from many employees, if you start working with them, is that they are hesitant towards a change because they have so many bad experiences from prior change attempts. So, and I totally understand that you have some kind of change fatigue or some unbelief in whatever that new change is that you're coaching or consulting on. So to put that on the table, to discuss that, is very much a good conversation starter, I would say. Very helpful.
Yeah, great
I'd like to pick up on what Francie said about mindfulness. I've read some neuroscience research that shows if you do lots of meditation, your corpus callosum, which is a channel between the left and right brain hemispheres, actually thicken. And that enables also your prefrontal cortex becomes more conscious of your limbic brain.
Yep.
So you become more self-aware of what your deep brain, your parasympathetic brain is thinking. And so therefore you can control those triggers a lot more. So mindfulness is really important to be able to control your emotions.
Excellent.
Yeah, good point, Gareth. Yeah, awesome. I also recognized it myself, and I experimented a bit with this when I read the article. Because it is a game that your brain plays between your conscious and your subconscious, as soon as you believe in something, your response is quicker than when you don't believe in something. So if you ask a question to your team, for example, do you believe we are the right team to do it? And a person in your team is waiting for, I think it was more than 2.3 seconds. That is already the brain connection that's not in there fully believing that there is. And I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, that statement I made when I said, people say I believe it when I see it. It's the other way around. I will see it when I believe it.
That's it. Yeah. True.
That's good.
I have a question around helping a company go from what might be harmony in their current situation, and then going through the change into disharmony and conflict, and new ways of working, which may end up, sometimes it can be restructures and that kind of stuff. So how do you help a group sort of take those first steps in comfort?
Do you have anything, Bartwin, or not?
Well, so just to get the question correct, could you repeat it for me again?
So, as you go from, when you introduce change into a company, sometimes it can be a harmonious, company already. They kind of have their beliefs in the ways they've been doing things. How do you help people to transition into a unharmonious environment, or,
Yeah. So you're going from a belief to a disbelief, basically. I think what Bartwin mentioned as well before this is being honest. Like we often forget to have a discussion around people, and we forget that we are working with people. and it's not working with a framework or with a new ways of working. And I see it a lot happening, that there's so much focus on, this is the new ways of working, you just need to implement your Scrum framework, we just need a Scrum Master, do it and you will get there. And we forget to have the honest conversation. Do we actually believe this is going to help us? And especially in a situation which you described, where a company is doing okay, it feels really weird that somebody comes in and say, no, you've done it the wrong way, so we're now going to do it the other way. That is basically what you're telling your employees or your organization. And for me, and that's why I spend, and Bartwin as well, a lot of our time in engagements on one-on-one conversations is actually to find out, how is your belief set up? Do you believe you can do it? Do you believe you're in the right place? Do you believe this is going to benefit your organization? Do you actually feel still connected to your organization? We often like discard those kind of questions, just go like, okay, Monday morning, we start with Agile's fundamentals, and then everybody is Agile. And yeah, it's a frustrating thing of mine. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Anything else? Yeah, sorry.
How do you so how do you react when people say they don't believe, you know, that things can change or that they can do it?
Yeah, good question. For me, it comes back to the fact they have somewhere in their life had an experience which makes them not believe in it anymore. So to ask questions that are behind that answer is for me key. So saying like, I don't believe this is going to work. Okay, we can accept that and then leave it as it is. The power is to actually find out, okay, what is it actually you do believe, or why is it that you don't believe it? Do you think you're in the right place or not? And asking more in-depth questions to find out where is that belief coming from. Because if we don't understand where the belief is coming from, we are unable to support a different belief.
Yeah, for me, it's also related to the part of the DBA, so the volume of ownership. So if you have a very small amount of belief, then start off small.
Yeah.
So try first a small experiment that you do feel confident in, or have some level of belief at. And then take feedback from the results and then see if that works for you. I think that's the best iterative approach there.
Yeah.
But it would definitely be helpful to look at the reasons why somebody says they don't believe. And I always find it a very interesting discussion to have with somebody to find out their ideas or reasons to not believe, which can also be a strong belief, ironically. So that's good to talk about what that delivers to them. So if you don't believe in something very strongly, what is the effect of that, and what is the outcome that you are looking for, and what is needed to get to that outcome? So it's an interesting discussion to have. So I'm definitely interested in somebody saying I don't believe. Then somebody says, "You're sure? I believe everything you say," and we'll just start off it on Monday, and then in the back of their mind going like, this is never gonna work because we just tried something like this 3 years ago and we got nowhere.
I'm conscious of time, guys. I don't
Yes.
want to take more of your evening already. If you have any questions or remarks, please put them in the Google Sheet or in the chat. We'll collect them all. If you put your name in there, we will look you up on LinkedIn and make sure you get your answer on your question or a reaction on your feedback through LinkedIn.
Or discussion.
Or discussion. Or
you could join our Slack community and
that's it. Good one.
just saying, you know, we have a community.
Yeah, awesome.
No, and Marcella and Bartwin, thank you so much. The feedback on the chat has been amazing, and if you,
Cool.
I can't wait to print that out and look at all the chat because there's some really good insights. But thank you so much for taking the time. We're very excited and proud, that some homegrown people are doing the book thing. So can't wait to see that. Please keep us posted.
Yeah.
For the community, again, join our meetup Slack, join our Agile Auckland Slack community. There's a meetup channel, but Marcella and Bartwin are very easy to get a hold of. They're consultants, right? They so just our next event is Basics at Breakfast. That is a limited event. It'll be virtual. That's Wednesday the 26th. So if you've applied for that, send the email. I will be responding to that in the next couple days. So, and I'll get that sorted. And then in September, we have Tuesday the 15th. That'll be our meetup with Visual Friends. Hopefully we'll all be able to get back together. If not, we might find a virtual solution. Right after that, and it's yet to be scheduled, but Agile Coaching will be doing a follow-up to that Visual Friends event with Sujith from Radically. He's a very good visual presenter. So he'll be doing a meeting with Agile Coaching. It's sort of like a partnership sisterhood thing, just one after the other. And then Thursday the 17th of September, so it's going to be a busy week for meetup. Genesis, we will have our meetup at Genesis or virtually, just depending on the situation, but they're going to be talking about their new operating model. So stay tuned and stay connected and stay safe.
Thanks so much, guys, for joining. Thank you.